Hey guys, it's Matthew here once again. I got you a follow-up video on the extremely satisfying skill and build of Infernal Blow Jug Terminus Est. Two-hand crit character, I guess, using Lacerate for the end game and for really heavy single target. The character did end up clearing everything in the game off of what is essentially a fairly low budget because it is a Terminus Est, a very basic few chaos weapon, and just, getting most of its damage from Abyssus and most of its tankiness from Jug, thus making a pretty well-rounded, well-balanced jump, smash, and explode sort of build. So the gameplay itself with Infernal Blow was pretty much just stunning, and I do recommend that you try out Infernal Blow at some point with some melee character. It really doesn't have to be this one in particular. Most melee characters that you're currently playing will probably be able to fit in an Infernal Blow melee splash ancestral call setup and have a bit of fun with it. Because ultimately, I do want to show you the end game of this character, and it's not really going to factor in with Infernal Blow too much, because it's not necessarily a very good single target skill, as it is a very up close and personal name lock sort of skill, which will then be relying on Val double strike for really heavy single target, or actually swapping into Lacerate so that you can actually do some real solid end game with Lacerate, because it's just a bit more ranged and has a bit more single target damage. So I didn't really even take Infernal Blow into, let's say, Uber Elder, because it just doesn't make much practical sense. And I do have just a few clips of Infernal Blow in, I think, tier 14 or 15 Elder here, and Guardians, or mostly just the Guardians actually. It's, damage is actually pretty acceptable. It's something like 1 million Guardian damage, or 700k to a million Guardian damage off of the Terminus Est really isn't too shabby at all. But ultimately, when push comes to shove, you don't really want to be using Infernal Blow, because as you can see, you do have to be right up close and personal in the mob's face, and during certain times when you have to bail out or, take less damage, you can't really do anything, and you're just forced to run around and wait till your next opportunity to attack. And that is the plight of the actual pure melee character in this game, where a lot of these situations, a lot of these new endgame bosses will require you to do no damage for a period of time. And on something like Uber Elder, it's absolutely unforgivable. You either need a billion damage so that when you do have an opportunity to damage them, you one-shot all that shit and push over to the next phase, or you just end up playing the game for way too long trying to dodge all of this shit. So from here on out, it's all Lacerate gameplay, and Lacerate is still pretty fun and pretty endgame viable, especially given that this is a Terminus Est, nothing too special. Ultimately, it scales a bit worse than the double strike build that I showcased earlier, because Champion is pretty busted and so is double strike, so pairing those two together, you have much better single target damage than Lacerate. But Lacerate definitely holds its own once you start getting right amount of gear, and that means getting plenty of damage, plenty of attack speed, and then Lacerate, its area is actually pretty decent now, so that takes care of its own area at this stage. So unfortunately, it's not really a pure Infernal Blow build. It is an Infernal Blow build just for the sake and purpose of clearing maps, which I do recommend doing because it's a lot of fun and lets you clear lots of maps, well, as you'd want to. But ultimately, it's just, I don't think it's a good idea to be pure Infernal Blow. So now I've got basically a few minutes worth of clips versus my Uber Elder attempt. So this is the last attempt I did, the third run. I bricked 2 of them because I was trying to figure out how I was going to do this with this character and with Lacerate, and it was kind of a learning experience because damage on full life doesn't help me very much as one of my links, and neither does multi-strike. Multi-strike, even though I have a shitload of attack speed, locks you down for just a little bit too much against a lot of these sort of dodging situations with the balls and the beams and everything. And as well as that, multi-strike has its own auto-targeting function and system, where sometimes you'll be attacking one of the invulnerable targets, sometimes you'll be attacking something you don't want to attack altogether, and that means you might leave one of the propagators up, you might not be attacking the right target for the damage, and ultimately it took me a few runs to figure out that I really can't use multi-strike and that I can't use damage on full life, and ultimately figured out that Lacerate kinda sucks for this. So you can see here, I do end up dying one time here because I was sandwiched between the explosion and the Elder sort of degen arc cone thing. Ended up dying there. I felt like I had nowhere left to move, and it just looked like I ran into a ball when it was kind of a potato play, but trust me, nowhere to move. That aside, it is kind of a hard fight to learn as Lacerate, since it's not the greatest skill for this, and with multi-strike, like I said, locks you down way too much. Without multi-strike, my damage isn't incredible, so it does mean that it takes a while for me to get through some of these phases. And one of the things I definitely learned is that I do leap way too much to avoid everything. I don't have the greatest movement speed, but just a little shimmy, a little run from one spot to the next, just a couple of steps is going to be enough to dodge the balls that I need to dodge or the icicles that I need to dodge. So too much leaping, and it just means that I get myself in trouble sometimes because I leap to the wrong spot or run through something like that, and it gets a little bit overwhelming. So I do end up killing Elder on this round, and I think it took me 2 or 3 deaths in this run, but it wasn't the cleanest one, and I definitely think I actually could do this flawlessly given enough practice, but you just do not get that much practice in these types of situations because, well, it takes 8 Guardian maps and probably about 2 hours to get to your Uber Elder proc, and then if you kill him, he's gone until next time. So Comb's roots, you can see, make a huge difference. When he's got his slow phase up, you don't get slowed, so that does let you play around a lot better. Once you have really good leech and really good regen, it makes all of this sort of phase a lot easier too, or just really good damage, which lets you basically insta-phase from one part to the next. That's the key aspects to most Uber Elder fights. So if you're looking for an Uber Elder character to kill some shit, it's probably not this one. It's kind of tough with Lacerate and two-handed weapons. Not ideal at all. A dual wield situation, maybe some double strike, maybe some Blade Flurry. All of that's going to get a lot better, a lot faster for the Uber Elder fight. And one other thing I should mention, Vile Double Strike actually goes quite a long way in this fight. You do get to charge it up throughout the fight versus the actual bosses and also the portals that you kill. And every time you press Vile Double Strike, it pretty much helps you to push over a phase without even needing to be on the boss itself. So Vile Double Strike in these builds is pretty damn useful and pretty damn handy. Now lastly, I did get a Watcher's Eye after spending about 20 exalts trying to 6-link my chest. It finally 6-linked, but it bankrupted me. I then got this Watcher's Eye. Due to the Clarity Discipline mod, or Clarity Energy Shield mod, it meant that I got about 6 exalts back, so that's how I got a bit of my currency at the moment. Now just to wrap up our character a bit more, I will show you the final setup and the few little changes I've made throughout the character process. Currently level 92, wet paper jug, and it wasn't really that wet paper in the end. It was actually pretty tanky. With my chest giving me about 1900 armor, that did mean that I could get 14k armor unbuffed with all of the endurance charges up, 7 of them in fact. It was pretty tanky. We had quite a lot of defense even through the abysses, and Jug was a pretty strong choice here for the defense. Ultimately, if you're going to roll Jug, I feel as a crit-based build, you really have to shoehorn an abyssus in to get some damage, because the only other thing you get is a bit of attack speed and, accuracy here. So if you're gonna do a Jug, I think you pretty much have to do an Abyssus. Otherwise, you're better off just playing champion with no Abyssus, having more damage and probably more survivability that way. But there's not really too many other changes I think I need to mention. Basically, on the jewels, you want attack speed and crit multi primarily, so that's what I've done on all of my jewels that you should be able to notice. And the Terminus Est was the endgame weapon, even though I tried crafting a bit more. It takes a pretty serious weapon for a two-hander to get better than a Terminus Est, especially when synergized with Abyssus because of how fast it is and how much crit it has. It needs to be like a 450 probably physical DPS, exquisite blade, and then on top of that you don't have frenzy charges, so it gets just a little bit slower once again. Terminus S are just very baseline for this type of build, and you can't even go dual wield or an Onigoroshi, but is kind of expensive to get a good one-hander and a stat stick to then compete with Terminus Est in the dual setup, though you can probably do that in, let's say, the champion build just a little bit easier, just a little bit better. So the problems are that Infernal Blow and Lacerate both don't have any additional scaling like the double strike build does with all of that additional extra fizz, which means your weapon can be a piece of shit and get even better. So double strike in this sort of setup should be even better than what I'm currently running of Infernal Blow or Lacerate. But once again, this entire character will be in the Path of Building paste bin, linked in the build thread, but I'll just quickly wrap up that our Mana Leech comes from this ring over here. Life Leech, I don't really have any except for Blood Rage, and thus in the actual Uber Elder fight, I was running a Life Leech support in my actual links, because we're a little bit too far away from getting Leech here or here, but I do recommend getting some Leech on your gear or tree somewhere if you want to get just a bit tankier, especially for Uber Elder. For general mapping, I didn't find it a problem because Blood Rage definitely kept me up as much as I needed to. Besides that, this is the kind of chest you're looking for. They're not too hard to come by without the armor rolls, and it's going to be just a little bit better than Belly of the Beast because you do want lots of armor. And other than that, Comb's Roots, lots of life there. 1 endurance charge if you can get it, and that means you don't have to take this ascendancy here. So it's basically that ascendancy in a can. And then besides that, I will show you the 6-link because I did finally get it after 20 exalts worth of fusings, and that is Infernal Blow, Melee Fizz, Damage on Full Life, Ancestral Call, Melee Splash. My 6th link ended up being Added Fire, and when we go into single target, you take out Ancestral Call, you put in Multi-Strike, and when you go into a really big single target, you take out Melee Splash and put in Ruthless. So that ends up being your 6th link there, and then your 5 link over here is Double Strike, Damage on Full Life, Melee Fizz, Ancestral Warchief, and Maim. The rest of the gear is pretty straightforward and pretty basic, and I've probably gone over it enough times for you guys to understand it. Like I said, it's not really strictly an Infernal Blow character. It was trying to be a bit of both, and just about any sword skill here will fit in and be just fine. Ultimately, you can build more into Infernal Blow if you really want, with actual fire nodes down here and the Ellie nodes over here, or you can just go pure Lacerate like I did. Though Lacerate I found was just a little bit less fun for mapping, so I definitely tried to Infernal Blow as much as I could for mapping and then swap in Lacerate just to actually get down to business. It's not really the greatest end game and Uber Elder type character, but it can do all of that. The point is, it's just really nice for mapping, and it's okay for all those. It's just nice that it can still take on that content, even though it's not the greatest for the absolute end game of Uber Elder. That's been this character, guys, the Jug, probably the only Jug I'll make this season. I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you very much for watching, and see you next time.